The champagne flute shattered against the marble floor of the Manhattan rooftop bar, sending crystal shards across the terrace like fallen stars. Emma Rodriguez watched the amber liquid spread in slow motion, her heart hammering against her ribs. As the reality of what she'd just done crashed over her, the man she'd thrown her drink at stood motionless. Champagne dripping from his dark hair onto a suit that probably cost more than her rent. Ice cubes clung to his lapels like diamonds, and in the golden glow of the city lights, 40 stories below, he looked less like the cheating ex-boyfriend she'd mistaken him for, and more like a statue carved from granite and fury. "Interesting. Greeting," he said, his voice carrying the kind of controlled calm that made Emma's skin prickle with warning. He reached for a napkin with movements so precise they seemed choreographed, never breaking eye contact as he wiped champagne from his face. The rooftop had gone silent, except for the distant hum of traffic and the thundering of Emma's pulse in her ears. Every well-dressed patron on the terrace had turned to stare, their conversations frozen mid-sentence. Even the bartender had stopped, polishing glasses. "I thought you were someone else," Emma managed, her voice smaller than she'd intended. The words felt inadequate, pathetic even, but they were all she had. "Clearly," he finished, cleaning his face and straightened, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes the color of storm clouds. "Though I'm curious what someone else could have done to deserve assault by Dom Perignon." Heat flooded Emma's cheeks. She'd grabbed the first drink within reach, not realizing it was a $300 bottle of champagne until it was already airborne. "He broke my friend's heart. Ghosted her after 6 months, right when she thought they were getting serious." Something flickered across his expression, too quick to interpret. "And you appointed yourself as her vengeful guardian angel," something like that. Emma lifted her chin, trying to summon the righteous anger that had propelled her across the terrace. But under his steady gaze, her conviction wavered. From this close, she could see he was nothing like Jake Morrison. This man had presence, a gravitational pull that made the air between them feel electric. He stepped closer, close enough that she caught his scent beneath the champagne, something expensive and clean that made her think of storm-swept oceans. "Do you always act on impulse? Or am I special?" "Usually I think things through." The lie came out breathless. Emma had a history of leaping before looking, of letting her emotions drive her decisions. That's what had gotten her kicked out of her sorority, fired from her first job, and now apparently into trouble with a stranger who radiated the kind of power that could crush her without effort. Usually. His mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "How refreshing. Most people I meet are calculatingly polite." The crowd around them had started to lose interest, conversations resuming in hushed tones. But Emma felt pinned by his attention like a butterfly under glass. "I should go. My friend will be looking for me. Should you?" He tilted his head, studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "Or should you stay and tell me more about this friend of yours? The one worth defending with expensive champagne?" Emma's throat went dry. There was something predatory in the way he watched her, as if he could see straight through her bravado to the uncertainty beneath. "Why would you want to know?" "Because Emma Rodriguez," he said, and her blood turned to ice at the sound of her full name on his lips. "I think we have more to discuss than just your interesting approach to conflict resolution." The city lights blurred as panic set in. "How do you know my name?" His smile turned sharp, dangerous. "The same way I know you start work at Blackwood Industries next Monday? It's the same way I know you graduated summa cum laude from Columbia and spent last summer volunteering at a women's shelter instead of taking the paid internship at your father's law firm." Emma's legs went weak. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. The expensive suit, the commanding presence, the way other patrons had given him a wide berth even before her public spectacle. "You're Alexander Blackwood." The words came out as barely a whisper. "I am." He extended his hand, still damp with champagne. "Our new boss. And I have to say, Miss Rodriguez, you've certainly made quite the first impression." The Manhattan skyline sparkled behind him like a jeweled web, beautiful and treacherous. Emma stared at his outstretched hand, knowing that whatever happened next would change everything. She was right. Emma's apartment felt like a cage. She'd paced the narrow space between her kitchen counter and couch so many times that she'd worn a path in the hardwood, her bare feet making soft sounds against the floor as Sunday night dissolved into Monday morning. The resignation letter sat on her laptop screen, cursor blinking after her signature like a dying heartbeat. 3 drafts, each one more pathetic than the last. How did you explain that you'd assaulted your new boss with champagne? Because you'd mistaken him for a cheating ex-boyfriend you'd never actually met. Her phone buzzed. Sarah's 3rd call since the incident. Em, you can't keep ignoring me. I need to know you're alive. Emma closed her eyes, pressing the phone against her ear. I'm alive. Professionally dead, but alive. It can't be that bad. Maybe he'll appreciate your passion. CEOs love passionate employees, right? Sarah, I threw champagne at Alexander Blackwood. Not a drink, not a beer. Dom Perignon. On a rooftop full of Manhattan's elite. Emma collapsed onto her couch, staring at the ceiling. Pretty sure passion isn't the word he'd use. Okay, so it's bad. But maybe there is no maybe. I'm sending my resignation first thing in the morning and starting fresh somewhere else. Maybe Portland. I hear Portland is nice. Emma Rodriguez, you are not running away to Portland because of one mistake. One mistake. If only it were that simple. But Emma couldn't shake the memory of Alexander's eyes, the way they'd seemed to see straight through her defenses. The controlled fury in his voice when he'd said her name. The champagne dripping from his dark hair like tears. I have to go, Emma whispered. I need to figure out what to wear to my own execution. She hung up before Sarah could protest, and stared at her closet. Everything looked wrong. Too casual, too formal, too desperate, too defiant. Finally, she settled on a navy dress that made her feel competent, paired with the one pair of heels she owned that weren't knockoffs. The Blackwood Industries. Building rose from the Manhattan streets like a glass monument to ambition. Emma stood on the sidewalk, tilting her head back to see the top floors disappear into the morning clouds. Somewhere up there, Alexander Blackwood was probably planning her termination. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt endless. Each floor that passed brought a fresh wave of nausea and the increasingly desperate urge to hit the emergency stop button and hide till her problems solved themselves. The reception area was all clean lines and expensive art, the kind of space that whispered exclusivity and power. Behind a white desk that looked like it belonged in a spaceship sat a woman who could have stepped off a magazine cover. Emma Rodriguez, the receptionist said with a smile that held equal parts sympathy and curiosity. I'm Jessica. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you? Emma's stomach dropped. He is, oh yes. He's been here since 5:30. Jessica's smile widened as she poured coffee from a machine that probably cost more than Emma's car. Word of advice? He appreciates directness. Humor, though I'm not sure how he feels about champagne-based greetings. The coffee was perfect, rich, and smooth, but it tasted like ashes in Emma's mouth. You heard about that? Honey, half of Manhattan heard about that. Mysterious woman attacks tech mogul with Dom Perignon was trending on social media until about an hour ago. Emma nearly choked. I was trending. Past tense. Mr. Blackwood's PR team is very efficient. Jessica's phone buzzed. That's your cue. He's ready. The walk down the hallway felt like a death march. Emma's heels clicked against marble floors, past awards and newspaper clippings featuring a younger Alexander Blackwood in every photo. He looked confident, untouchable, the kind of man who'd never had champagne thrown at him by a stranger in heels. Jessica stopped before imposing double doors. Remember directness and humor? You've got this. The office beyond was bigger than Emma's entire apartment. Alexander stood with his back to her, silhouetted against floor-to-ceiling. Windows that offered a view of Central Park. He'd traded his champagne-stained suit for charcoal gray that fit him, like it had been tailored by gods. Miss Rodriguez. He didn't turn around. Punctual. I appreciate that, Mr. Blackwood. Emma's voice was steadier than she felt. I brought my resignation. I'm sure you did. He turned, and Emma was struck again by the intensity of his gaze. In the morning light, his eyes were more green than gray, with flecks of gold that caught the sun. But I'd like to hear your story first. The real story. He gestured to a leather chair across from his desk. Emma sat carefully, hyper-aware of every movement under his scrutiny. Why did you think I was Jake Morrison? Emma took a breath, choosing honesty over diplomacy. Because from behind, in dim lighting, you looked exactly like him. Same build, same hair, same confident posture. She met his gaze. And because seeing him at what was supposed to be Sarah's celebration felt like a betrayal of everything she'd been through. Tell me about Sarah. The question caught her off guard. She's my best friend, has been since college. She's brilliant, kind, trusting to a fault. Emma's voice grew stronger. Jake took advantage of that trust. Made her believe she was special, then disappeared when things got real. She deserved better. Alexander leaned back, studying her with predatory focus. So you appointed yourself as her defender. Someone had to be. And it never occurred to you to confirm your target's identity before launching your attack. Heat flooded Emma's cheeks. In hindsight, that would have been smarter. In hindsight, Alexander repeated, and she could swear she saw amusement flicker across his features. Miss Rodriguez, do you know what I've been doing since Friday night? Emma's mouth went dry. Planning my termination? Research? He opened a file on his desk with her name on the tab. Did you know that in college you organized a campus-wide boycott until the dining services agreed to source ingredients locally? Or that you spent spring break building houses in Guatemala instead of partying in Cancun? Emma blinked, confused. How do you know that? Your marketing portfolio includes a campaign that increased donations to the Children's Hospital by 40%. All pro bono work. He closed the file and leaned forward. You see injustice, and you act. Sometimes impulsively, sometimes without thinking it through completely, but you act. Mr. Blackwood, I don't understand. Alexander stood and walked to the window, hands clasped behind his back. I'm launching a new initiative, a foundation focused on supporting women entrepreneurs. I need someone passionate, fearless, willing to fight for what's right. He turned back to her. Someone who won't back down when things get difficult. Emma's brain struggled to process what she was hearing. Are you offering me a different position? I'm offering you a choice. His smile was sharp, dangerous. You can take the marketing coordinator job you were hired for, and we'll pretend Friday night never happened. Or you can run the foundation. Better salary, your own team, the chance to actually change lives. Emma stared at him, searching for the catch. Why would you offer me this? I attacked you with champagne. You defended someone you love without. Thinking about consequences, his eyes held challenge and something else, something that made her pulse race. In my experience, Miss Rodriguez, that kind of loyalty is rare. He extended his hand across the desk. What do you say? Ready to channel that righteous indignation into something productive? Emma looked at his outstretched hand, then at his face. The offer was too good, too convenient. Men like Alexander Blackwood didn't reward people who humiliated them in public. They destroyed them. But the alternative was Portland, and a lifetime of wondering what if. She reached for his hand. 3 weeks into her new role, Emma discovered that working for Alexander Blackwood was like dancing on the edge of a knife. Exhilarating, dangerous, and one wrong step away from disaster. Her office was on the 39th floor, one level below. His, with windows that offered a view of the Hudson River. The space was sleek and modern. Everything she'd dreamed of when she'd first moved to New York with nothing but ambition and a suitcase full of thrift store blazers. But dreams, Emma was learning, came with unexpected complications. The Morrison Foundation wants to partner with us, she announced. Bursting into Alexander's office with a contract clutched in her hands, she'd been too excited to knock, too caught up in the victory to remember protocol. Alexander looked up. From his computer, one eyebrow raised. Emma, ever heard of knocking? Sorry, she stopped, breathless from her sprint up the stairs. Taking the elevator would have meant waiting, and waiting was impossible when she had news this good. Jake Morrison's Family Foundation wants to partner with us on the mentorship program. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Alexander's fingers stilled on his keyboard, his expression shifting from mild annoyance to something much more dangerous. "Jake Morrison," he repeated, voice carefully neutral.
Yes.
"Apparently his mother runs their charitable foundation, and she's been following our work. She wants to contribute $5 million to the Women's Entrepreneurship Program." Emma set the contract on his desk, too excited to notice the way his jaw had tightened. $5 million, Alexander. Do you know what we could do with that kind of funding? Alexander stood slowly, moving around his desk with predatory grace. "Tell me, Emma, what do you know about Jake Morrison?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean?" "He's Sarah's ex, the one who broke her heart. What else?"
What else?
Frowned, trying to understand why he looked like he was about to murder someone. "I don't know. Rich family, works in finance, terrible taste in women, apparently. He works for Morrison Capital, one of our biggest competitors." Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. His family's foundation is a tax write-off designed to make them look philanthropic, while they systematically undercut companies like mine. The contract felt suddenly heavy in Emma's hands. "I didn't know. Of course you didn't, because you saw an opportunity to help women and jumped at it without doing your research." He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, see the gold flecks in his eyes that meant trouble? "Tell me, Emma, what do you think happens when we accept Morrison money? When we become dependent on their funding? Understanding dawned like a punch to the gut. They control us." "Exactly." "And when Jake Morrison's mother decides she doesn't like our approach? Or when Morrison Capital wants to eliminate competition? What do you think happens to our foundation?" Emma felt sick. "They pull the funding, and we collapse." $5 million? Emma. Enough to make us dependent, not enough to make us stable. Alexander was standing directly in front of her now, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "Did you really think Jake Morrison's family would offer to help the woman who threw champagne at their son's business rival?" Wait. Emma's brain struggled to process what he'd just said. "What do you mean their son's business rival?" Alexander's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "You still don't know, do you? Jake Morrison wasn't just some random finance guy who broke your friend's heart. He's my direct competitor." "And you, Emma Rodriguez? Threw champagne at me while defending the honor of a woman he dated specifically to get information about you?" The room started to spin. "That's not possible. Isn't it? Think about it. Sarah gets her dream job at a tech company, starts dating a charming finance guy who's very interested in her new friend Emma. The same Emma who's about to start working for Alexander Blackwood." His voice was conversational now, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Jake pumps her for information about you, about your background, your weaknesses. Then when he has what he needs, he disappears." Emma sank into the chair behind her, the contract falling from nerveless fingers. "You're saying he used her to get to me? Saying Jake Morrison is very good at playing the long game. And you, with your righteous anger and your inability to think before you act, played right into his hands." The truth hit her like a physical blow. Sarah's excitement about her new boyfriend, his casual questions about Emma's job prospects, the way he'd seemed so understanding about her friendship with Sarah, so supportive of their girls' nights and shared confidences. "He set this up," Emma whispered. "The whole thing. He wanted me to see him at that bar. And you gave him exactly what he wanted. A public humiliation of his biggest rival." Alexander moved back to his desk, but his eyes never left her face. "The only thing Jake Morrison didn't count on was me offering you a job instead of destroying your career." Emma felt like she was drowning. "Why didn't you tell me?" "'Cause I wanted to see what you'd do. How long it would take you to figure it out on your own." He picked up the contract, scanning the terms with clinical detachment. "I have to admit I'm disappointed. 3 weeks, Emma. It took you 3 weeks to walk into my office with Morrison money in your hands." The accusation in his voice made her flinch. "I was trying to help the foundation." "Were you? Or were you trying to prove that you belonged? Hear that you were more than just an impulsive woman who throws champagne at strangers." The words hit their mark. Emma felt tears prick her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Not here. Not in front of him." "I quit," she said, standing on unsteady legs. "No. Alexander's voice cracked like a whip. You don't get to quit. You get to fix this. How am I supposed to fix this? I've been played by one man and manipulated. By another, manipulated. Alexander's laugh was harsh. Emma, everything I've done has been transparent. I offered you a job, resources, opportunities. What exactly have I manipulated you into? This conversation, making me feel like an idiot for trying to help. You feel like an idiot because you acted like one? There's a difference. He moved closer again, close enough that she could see the anger simmering beneath his controlled exterior. But feeling stupid isn't the same as being stupid. You're not stupid, Emma. You're impulsive, idealistic, and occasionally reckless, but you're not stupid. She looked up at him, confused by the shift in his tone. Then what am I supposed to do? You're going to call Jake Morrison's mother and decline her generous offer. Then you're going to research every potential partner thoroughly before bringing them to my attention. Then you're going to help me figure out how to turn Jake Morrison's game against him. Emma's pulse quickened. What do you mean? Alexander's smile was predatory. I mean, Miss Rodriguez, that it's time you learned how the real game is played. And lucky for you, I happen to be very good at winning. The Manhattan skyline glittered beyond the windows, beautiful and merciless. Emma stared at Alexander's outstretched hand for the second time in 3 weeks, knowing that accepting it would change everything. Again, this time she didn't hesitate. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Emma would meet with Jake Morrison, wearing a wire, and extract a confession about his manipulation of Sarah. Alexander would have the evidence he needed to destroy Morrison Capital's reputation. Would finally have justice for her friend. It should have been perfect. Instead, Emma found herself sitting across from Jake Morrison in a trendy Soho restaurant, fighting the urge to throw her wine in his face. Again. You look surprised to see me, Jake said, signaling the waiter for another bottle. He was exactly as Sarah had described him. A charming smile, perfectly styled hair, the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. I have to admit, when you called asking to meet, I was curious. Emma kept her voice steady, professional. The wire taped to her ribs felt like it was burning through her skin. It's not every day the man who broke my best friend's heart wants to have dinner. Jake's laugh was smooth, practiced, right to the point. I like that about you, Emma. Sarah always said you were direct. When exactly did she say that? What? During one of our many conversations about you. Jake leaned back in his chair, studying her with predatory interest. She was very proud of her brilliant friend who was about to work for Alexander Blackwood. Very proud and very talkative. Emma's stomach clenched. So you did use her to get information about me? Use is such an ugly word. Jake swirled his wine, completely at ease. I prefer to think of it as a mutually beneficial relationship. Sarah got to date someone who appreciated her insights, and I got to learn about the fascinating Emma Rodriguez. And when you had what you needed, you disappeared. I ended things when they became complicated. It's what adults do, Emma. They make difficult choices based on practical considerations. The casual cruelty in his voice made Emma's hand shake. Practical considerations. You broke her heart. Hearts heal. Business advantages are harder to come by. Jake leaned forward, his smile turning sharp. Did you really think your little champagne incident was an accident? That you just happened to mistake Alexander Blackwood for me in a crowded bar? Emma felt the world tilt sideways. What are you saying? I'm saying I've been planning this for months. The rooftop bar was my suggestion. The timing was perfect. All I had to do was stand in the right spot and wait for Emma Rodriguez's famous temper to do the rest. You wanted me to throw champagne at Alexander? I wanted you to humiliate him? Publicly. To show Manhattan's elite that the great Alexander Blackwood could be brought low by an impulsive woman with a grudge? Jake's eyes glittered with satisfaction. I just didn't expect him to offer you a job instead of having you arrested. The wire against Emma's ribs felt like a snake coiling tighter with each revelation. She forced herself to keep talking, too. Get the confession Alexander needed. So what now? You got what you wanted, did I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my plan backfired spectacularly. Instead of destroying Blackwood's reputation, I handed him the most loyal employee he's ever had. Jake's voice turned dangerous. Tell me, Emma, what's it like working for a man who manipulated you as thoroughly as I manipulated Sarah? As blood turned to ice. What do you mean? You really don't know, do you? Poor, naive Emma, still believing in fairy tales? Jake laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Alexander Blackwood knew exactly who you were that night. He'd been tracking you for weeks, waiting for the perfect opportunity to recruit you away. From Morrison Capital? That's impossible. I never worked for Morrison Capital. No, but you were supposed to. We offered you a position 3 days before Blackwood Industries did. A better position with better pay. But somehow, our offer never reached you. Jake's smile was cruel. Funny how emails can get lost, isn't it? Emma's mind raced, trying to process what he was saying. You're lying, am I? Think about it, Emma. Alexander Blackwood doesn't do anything without calculating the odds. Do you really believe he offered you a promotion because you impressed him with your champagne-throwing skills? Or because he knew exactly how to turn your impulsive nature to his advantage? The restaurant around them seemed to fade into background noise. Emma's world had narrowed to Jake's voice, to the terrible possibility that everything she thought she knew was wrong. He researched you for weeks before that night, Jake continued. Knew about your college activism, your volunteer work, your tendency to act first and think later. He even knew about Sarah's relationship with me. Did you really think it was coincidence that he offered you a job running a foundation for women entrepreneurs? The one thing guaranteed to appeal to your sense of justice? Emma felt sick. The wire against her ribs seemed to burn hotter with each word. Stop. Alexander Blackwood played you as thoroughly as I played Sarah. The only difference is that he's better at it. More subtle, more patient. Jake reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. We're the same, Emma. We both got used by men who see people as chess pieces to be moved around a board. We're nothing alike. Emma pulled her hand away, fighting the urge to flee. I never hurt anyone, didn't you? What do you think it did to Sarah when you chose Alexander Blackwood over her? When you took his side without even asking for her? Version of events? The accusation hit like a physical blow? Emma thought of Sarah's hurt expression when she'd explained about the foundation job, the way her friend had withdrawn over the past few weeks. I was trying to help her. By working for the man who orchestrated her heartbreak? By making her pain the foundation of your career? Jake's voice was soft now, almost gentle. Face it, Emma. You're just like me. You saw an opportunity and took it, regardless of who got hurt. Emma stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need to go. Running away won't change the truth. Jake's voice followed her as she headed for the door. Ask him. Emma, ask Alexander Blackwood how long he's been planning this. Ask him about the Morrison Capital job offer that mysteriously disappeared. Ask him how it feels to be his most successful acquisition. Emma pushed through the restaurant's doors into the cold night air, Jake's words echoing in her mind. The wire against her ribs felt like a brand, burning with the weight of questions she was afraid to ask. Her phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. How did it go? Did you get what we needed? Emma stared at the message, her finger hovering over the reply button. She had gotten what they needed. Jake's confession was clear, damning, everything Alexander required to destroy Morrison Capital. But Jake's accusations hung in the air like poison, making her question everything she thought she knew about the man who'd given her a second chance, or the man who'd been manipulating her from the very beginning. Emma deleted the text without replying and walked into the Manhattan night, the truth burning against her ribs like a secret she wasn't sure she wanted to keep. Emma stood outside Alexander's office at midnight, the wire from her dinner with Jake clutched in her trembling hands. The building was empty, except for the security guards and the ghosts of her own doubts. Through the glass doors, she could see Alexander at his desk, still working despite the late hour. The sight of him there, dedicated and alone, made her chest ache with something she didn't want to name. She knocked. Emma. Alexander looked up, surprise flickering across his features. I wasn't expecting you tonight. How did the meeting go? She held up the wire without speaking, watching his face for any sign of guilt or calculation. All she saw was exhaustion and something that looked like concern. "Did you get what we needed?" he asked. "I got more than we needed." Emma moved into the office, closing the door behind her. Jake confessed to everything, choosing Sarah, manipulating. The situation at the bar, even planning for me to throw champagne at you. Alexander's expression hardened. "Good. We can destroy Morrison Capital with this." He also told me something else. Emma set the wire on his desk but didn't sit down. Said you knew who I was that night, that you'd been tracking me for weeks. Silence stretched between them like a chasm. Alexander's face gave nothing away, but Emma had learned to read the subtle signs. The way his jaw tightened, almost imperceptibly. The stillness that came over him when he was calculating his next move. He said Morrison Capital offered me a job that mysteriously never reached me. Emma continued. He said you intercepted their offer so you could recruit me first. Alexander stood slowly, moving around his desk with that predatory gray sheet. Come to recognize? And you believe him? I don't know what to believe anymore. Emma's voice cracked. I need you to tell me the truth, Alexander. All of it. He stopped in front of her, close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his eyes. The truth is complicated. Try me.
Alexander
Was quiet for a long moment, studying her face as if memorizing it. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Morrison Capital did offer you a position, a junior marketing role with basic responsibilities and mediocre pay. Emma's heart sank, and you intercepted it. Had their offer redirected to my team, yes. Alexander's admission was matter-of-fact, unashamed. But not for the reasons Jake Morrison thinks. Then why? Because I'd been following your work for months. Your college campaigns, your volunteer projects, the pro bono marketing you did for nonprofits. You were brilliant, passionate, wasted on whatever corporate drone position Morrison could offer you. Emma stared at him. So you decided what was best for me? I decided to give you an opportunity to use your talents for something that mattered. Alexander's voice grew stronger. Morrison Capital would have buried you in busy work and corporate politics. With me, you're changing lives by lying to me, by manipulating me, just like Jake manipulated Sarah. No, Alexander's response was sharp, immediate. Jake Morrison used Sarah's emotions against her, made her trust him so he could betray that trust. Everything I've offered you has been real. It's a job, the foundation, the chance to make a difference. But you knew I'd throw champagne at you? Alexander's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. I knew you were impulsive. I knew. You'd defend someone you cared about without thinking about consequences. But no, Emma. I didn't orchestrate public humiliation. I'm not that good at predicting chaos. Emma wanted to believe him. The rational part of her brain pointed out that Alexander's actions, while ethically questionable, had ultimately benefited her. He'd given her opportunities she never would have had otherwise, trusted her with important work, supported her ideas even when they challenged him. But the part of her that had been burned by Jake's manipulations whispered that Alexander was just better at the game, more subtle, more patient. How do I know you're telling the truth? Alexander reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a thick folder. Because I'm going to show you everything. He opened the folder, revealing pages of documents, emails, reports. This is your file, Emma. Every piece of research I did, every conversation I had about you, every decision I made regarding your career. Emma flipped through the pages with growing amazement. There were copies of her college newspaper articles, testimonials from nonprofit organizations she'd helped, detailed analyses of her marketing campaigns. The picture that emerged was of someone Alexander genuinely admired, not just a pawn to be used against his competitors. You really did offer me this job because you believed in my work. I offered you this job because you're extraordinary. Alexander's voice was quiet, intense. And because I was tired of watching talented people get buried in corporate bureaucracy when they could be changing the world. Emma looked up from the folder to find him watching her with an expression she'd never seen before. Vulnerable, uncertain. What about the champagne incident? How did you know I'd be at that bar? I didn't. Alexander ran a hand through his hair. the gesture more human than she'd ever seen him. I was there for a client meeting. Seeing you was pure coincidence, though I'll admit I recognized you immediately from the photos in your file. I threw champagne at you. I was furious, embarrassed, ready to have security escort you out and forget you existed. Alexander's smile was rueful. But then you explained why you did it. Your loyalty to Sarah, your willingness to defend someone you loved, even at personal cost. It reminded me why I'd wanted to hire you in the first place. Emma closed the folder, her mind spinning. So Jake was wrong. About the manipulation. About you orchestrating everything. Jake Morrison is a Scorpion, Emma. He stings because it's his nature, but that doesn't mean everyone else operates the same way. Emma looked at Alexander, really looked at him. Expensive suit couldn't hide the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight of responsibility he carried. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked human, fallible, real. I owe you an apology, she said quietly. No, you don't. You owe yourself the truth. Alexander moved closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. I did manipulate the situation, Emma. I intercepted Morrison's offer because I believed. You deserved better. I researched you extensively because that's how I make decisions. I even used your guilt about the champagne incident to offer you a position you might not have taken otherwise. Emma's breath caught. Then Jake was right. Jake was partially right. The difference is my motivation. Alexander's eyes held hers, unflinching. Everything I did was to give you opportunities, not to take them away. To build you up, not tear you down. To help you become who you were meant to be. And what if I decide I don't want to be that person? What if I want to make my own choices? Without your intervention? Alexander stepped back, giving her space. Then you walk away. Tonight, no strings attached, no consequences. I'll give you a glowing recommendation, help you find a position anywhere you want to go. The offer hung. Between them like a bridge. Emma could take it, could walk away from Alexander Blackwood and his complicated games, and start fresh somewhere else. It would be the safe choice, the smart choice. Instead, she moved closer. What if I stay? Then we figure out how to work together. As equals, no more manipulation, no more secrets. It's just two people trying to change the world, one foundation at a time. Emma reached for the wire on his desk, the evidence that could destroy Jake Morrison and everything he'd built, starting with, this, if that's what you want? Or we could take a different approach. What kind of approach? Alexander's smile was sharp, dangerous, the kind that gives Jake Morrison exactly what he deserves, while protecting Sarah from any blowback. The kind that turns his own weapons against him. Emma felt a familiar thrill of anticipation. This was why she'd stayed, why she couldn't walk away, despite all the complications. Alexander Blackwood didn't just offer her a job. He offered her the chance to be magnificent. Tell me, she said. We're going to destroy Morrison Capital by building something better. We're going to use Jake's confession, not as a weapon, but as a foundation of every woman he's manipulated, every life he's damaged, every opportunity he's stolen. We're going to turn into fuel for our foundation. And Jake? Jake Morrison will wake up one day to find that his victims have become his competitors. That the women he used and discarded are now the ones with power, resources, and the ability to make sure he never hurts anyone again. Emma looked at the wire, then at Alexander, the man who'd given her champagne-soaked chaos and turned it into purpose, who'd seen her potential when she couldn't see it herself, who'd offered her the chance to become more than she'd ever imagined possible. Partners, she asked, extending her hand. Partners, Alexander confirmed, taking her hand in his, but he didn't let go, and Emma didn't pull away. Or something else, Alexander said, his voice softer now. Something I should have told you weeks ago. What? The night you threw champagne at me, after you walked away. I stood there dripping alcohol and mint leaves, and all I could think was that I'd never met anyone brave enough to attack a stranger in defense of a friend. Anyone passionate enough. To act without calculating the cost? Emma's heart began to race. Alexander, I've spent my entire life building walls, Emma, calculating every move, controlling every variable. But you make me want to tear them all down. The space between them felt electric, charged with possibilities and unspoken truths. Emma could feel the warmth of his skin where their hands touched, could see the vulnerability in his eyes that he'd never shown another soul. "This is complicated," she whispered. "The best things always are." Emma looked into his eyes and saw her future reflected there. Not the safe, predictable future she'd planned, but something wild and uncertain and infinitely more beautiful. She'd come to New York with nothing but ambition and a suitcase full of dreams. She'd thrown champagne at a stranger and turned her biggest mistake into her greatest opportunity. She'd been manipulated, betrayed, and tested in ways she'd never imagined. And now, standing in Alexander Blackwood's office at midnight, with the lights of Manhattan glittering beyond the windows, she realized she wouldn't change any of it. "So, what happens now?" she asked. Alexander's smile was soft, genuine, full of promise. "Now we change the world together." He leaned down, and Emma rose up to meet him, and when their lips touched, it tasted like champagne and possibilities and the beginning of everything she'd never known she wanted. Outside, Manhattan sparkled like a jeweled web, beautiful and treacherous, and full of endless opportunity. Inside, two people who'd found each other in the chaos of spilled champagne and calculated risks held each other close and planned their revolution. Some stories begin with fairy tale princesses and white knights. Others begin with champagne-soaked strangers and the courage to love someone complicated enough to deserve it. Emma Rodriguez had always preferred the second kind. The end asterisk liked this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. And let us know in the comments. We love connecting with our global community of romance lovers.